I mean, I'm living a good, holistic, healthy life, and I was still having all these health challenges.
Whoa, 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 it wasn't no unbreakable.
What if I told you that Chernobyl actually happened here in the United States more than once, and it might have been in your backyard? We're going to talk today about the hidden side of breast cancer with Tami Lee Boothby on exactly what she had to deal with a place, a town that some people might recognize the name of, Rocky Flats, and what unfolded for her and her family that changed the course of, where they were headed. So, Tammy, welcome.
Thank you so much, George.
So, first thing I would say is becoming unbreakable, there's probably nothing more jarring than a cancer diagnosis or a cancer diagnosis that might even not be your own, but might be someone else's or someone passing from cancer. It really wakes us up, it changes our life. Most people will fall back asleep. All right. It's just temporary because they go back to old habits. But the ones that are truly awake will make radical transformations. And I want to get into how you have been able to not just become unbreakable yourself, but help other women and other people also do the same thing in the face of what you had to go through. So, first off, let's tell me your story about this Rocky Flats thing because when you're explaining this to me before we started our recording, I thought it was very telling when you said it's just like Chernobyl happening, in your backyard, but no one telling you about it, the government not saying anything about it, and the radioactivity like leaking into the land, and that's not the end of the story. There's actually ways of fixing that potentially, but no one's bothered to try. So let's just jump right on in to like let's go from the very beginning of all that.
Oh, thank you so much. Um, so, so it starts with my mom, actually. Well, let me start here. My mom and dad lived in Colorado, and they just thought it was a beautiful place to live, and they were pregnant with their firstborn after my dad got back from Vietnam. They ended up getting pregnant, and it was Mother's Day of 1969 where they lived. And again, unbeknownst to anyone in the town where they lived, this is outside of Denver, there was a huge explosion. And it was at the plant called Rocky Flats. Rocky Flats was, to the townspeople, it was known to be like a scrubbing bubbles or cleaning supply company. Like nobody really knew. They just knew it was a government job, and nobody asked questions. And there were like two-headed dogs, two-headed cats, two-headed pigs, two-headed, like chickens, like things were strange. There were cancer diagnoses in, middle schoolers, like bone cancer, testicular cancer, and seventh graders. There was all kinds of things happening. The plant was picketed many times, by protesters, and they were in the news and the Denver Times or whatever, just called them conspiracy theorists and stuff. What ended up being, found out later is it was a plant that made the plutonium triggers, which is the heart of the atomic bomb. And plutonium's the most radioactive substance on Earth. And even a grain of rice size amount of plutonium ingested is fatal. And so, oh my goodness, when plutonium ignites, and there were many fires, and the largest fire that took place on Mother's Day, May 11, 1969, and they couldn't put the fire out. You can't put water on something radioactive. You can't, they were trying to figure it out. There's actually audio of a plane going over this fire, and the pilot's just freaking out because it was a huge white plume of fire. It was burning white. It was so hot. And and then, you think about the firefighters being called to go in. They knew this is plutonium that they're dealing with. So if they walked into this building that was on fire, they knew that they were going to get cancer and not survive this. And it always chokes me up thinking about that they made that decision to go in and sacrifice themselves to save the town, even though there were no alarms going off. People were not told to evacuate. People didn't even know this was happening. And think about it, it's like Mother's Day brunch. People are just having brunch, and these firefighters literally sacrificed their lives to go in and try to, do whatever they could do to put this fire out, even though they knew that they were becoming, totally contaminated. And um at the time, we didn't know. We didn't know why my mom got cancer when she was 28 years old, and it became metastatic and went to her brain, and she died when she was 30. I was just 7 months old at the time when my mom was admitted into the hospital for chemotherapy, at that in the 70s, that's what they did. You were just admitted. And so basically, I had a mom for 7 months, and then that was it. I wasn't, able to be around her. And um yeah, my mom, so I grew up with this, whole idea of, I lost a mom, but we didn't know why. And then I ended up with breast cancer at the age of 27. Again, not knowing why. I was vegetarian, I was a runner, I thought I was so healthy. And there was no genetic component, And so, um, yeah, I went through all my stuff. And then sadly, my sister, after me, was also diagnosed with breast cancer. And I mean, again, 3 out of 3 women all diagnosed. We didn't have the genetic link, and we didn't know why. And it was after my sister passed that I found out about Rocky Flats, and I called my dad. I heard this, I was listening to NPR, and this woman was on NPR talking about a book she wrote about Rocky Flats because she lived in that area, and she saw, from her bedroom window, she remembers seeing the plant lit up at night, and she always wondered what it was. It was part of the community, but nobody really knew what was happening. And once the government raided, hello, this is like the first time a government raided a governmental agency and shut it down in 1989. She came back from college as a journalist and went and got a job at Rocky Flats as a secretary. And she ended up, her job was to shred documents. But before she shredded them, she made photocopies and she used those for her book. It's called Full Body Burden. That's the book's name, by Kristen Iverson. And full body burden is the term for people who are, past the point of surviving radiation contamination. And so um, she was on NPR talking about her book. And I remember hearing this story, because it's outside of Colorado. This is where we lived. It was a plane, I had to pull the car over. I was so overcome with emotion, like, this is what happened to our family, my goodness. And I called my dad and I said, "Have you ever heard of Rocky Flats?" And he said, "Yeah, it's like a cleaning supply company, scrubbing bubbles, And he's like, "Tammy, we used to drive by there. We lived like 5 miles from the plant." And I said, "No, it had plutonium triggers, and these triggers caught fire, and it was like an atomic bomb detonated, and no one knew. Like, no, they knew, and they didn't tell anybody to evacuate. So all of that radioactive sediment is like in the dust in attics. It's still in the ground. It's in the groundwater. It's in the sediment in the lakes around there. It has a 25,000-year half-life, so there's no getting rid of it." I remember my dad was watching a YouTube video on it, and he just kept saying, how could they have let this happen? And that's really the crux of it. How could they have let this happen? It was 2 miles from a residential area, and this happened, and it's like, there's a huge concentration of breast cancer still today in that area, and it's like it's never even been talked about, of what happened. So, yeah, I am gonna write a book about
That's
this.
yeah, it's terrible. And it's not the first time, and it's not the last. There's a lot of people who live out in California. I live not far away from San Onofre base, and there's a huge plant out there as well, which is a nuclear facility, and they have cracks already because they store all the radioactive waste there on site. And they said, 25,000 years or 10,000 year like half-life, right? But there's cracks 25 years later in the containment vessels. So it's just a matter of like, who's going to deal with it? the next generation, the next politician, the next administration, like everyone pushes that off whilst people suffer. And this is way more common than I think most people realize. And I'm thankful for you, Tammy, for actually sharing this with us, because I think it will give people the opportunity to look a little bit closer to their community and look a little bit closer to maybe where they grew up, maybe where they're not living that right now, but maybe there's some things that you thought were very simple, and um, maybe they weren't so simple to explain some of the two-headed dogs and the four-headed snakes and like whoever else, whatever else happened, you know. I'm sure people didn't come out with superpowers. It's not like a Marvel comic book. You know, it's the opposite, right? Just really, really terrible. I'd like to talk a little bit about your personal story, if you're okay with this, on the cancer diagnosis. Like, what happened when you got your cancer diagnosis? What was going through your mind? How did you deal with that initially, especially since there was a bit of a history, you know, in your family?
Yeah, well, again, growing up, when I was diagnosed, I didn't know about Rocky Flats or anything, but I just knew my mom had died. She was diagnosed at 28. She was gone when she was 30, and she was in a coma most of the time. And, it was a disaster. They just couldn't help her. And, um, so my diagnosis came, it was I kind of felt a lump before my period, and women know, like, things can be a little strange right before your period, so I just let the cycle pass, and then afterwards, it felt like a jelly bean, it felt like a rock, it was just super solid and hard. And I was working in labor and delivery at the time as a nurse, and I went to work and just said, "Hey, I feel a lump," and I just had a few people check it out, and they're like, "Oh, you're so young, Tammy, I'm sure it's a cyst, it's probably nothing," and then they would feel it, and they would just grow silent and, like, wouldn't make eye contact with me. And I knew something was going on. And, it's surreal because you think, like, is this gonna be the same as my mom? Is this it? Is this my life? And, we I had a needle biopsy, and it was wild. I was working nights. I got home from work at, like, 8 in the morning, and I see my what do you call them now? The answering machine. I forget what they're called even. This is how old I am. I had an answering machine. This is in 2002. I could see it blinking, and I went and pressed it, although I just had a feeling like, "Oh, no, surely my doctor isn't gonna tell me I have cancer over an answering machine." But he did. He said, "Tammy, Dr. Gothier here, you have cancer, you gotta find a surgeon." And he was just like, you could tell he was just, rapid fire, like, "You gotta get to this, like, right now." And woo, that's not really what you wanna hear over an answer machine message. But, so that was September 17, 2002, and I had a lumpectomy, and then those margins weren't clear. It was just everything was, like, rush, rush, frantic because of my mom. And even though I did the genetic testing, it was negative. So I had the mastectomy date set for actually November 12th, the day we're recording here, in 2002. But before everything, I had already planned this trip to go backpacking in Colorado in October to see the colors and everything. And I was thinking, should I do the responsible thing and just work, and, because I won't be able to work, and, save up money, or should I just take this trip? Well, I took the trip because I didn't know what was gonna happen, and, I might not ever get the chance to take this trip. And so I went. There's a point to this story. I went on this backpacking trip in Colorado in October, just a couple weeks before everything was gonna change. Having a bilateral mastectomy is a big deal for a 27-year-old. And, I was sitting by the campfire in the Black Canyon, which is like a smaller version of the Grand Canyon. And one of the guys sitting around the fire, I was with some other people and a guide and stuff, and someone said I had cut off the top of a Gatorade bottle and made some ramen noodles. You're just camping. And someone said, "Tammy, that's probably how you got cancer in the first place. Don't you know you're not supposed to heat up plastic?" And yeah, I know that, but we're camping, and you know what I mean? You're trying to just make do. And it wasn't even what he said. It was just that he said it and it was out there, and I hadn't fully processed what was happening to me. And I walked away from the fire and I just started crying and, like, just letting it out. I had never really it hadn't hit me, that this is really my reality, and I went and sat down by this river down in the canyon and, just crying out to God, like, "Why? Why me? Is this it?" If this is the end of my life, then what is this for? What did I even do in 27 years? Like, how is this the end? And, why? Why me? All of those things. And I was starting to, like, calm myself thinking, as everything's swirling out of control, there's always the constant, there's always the sky, there's always the stars, there's always the moon, there's always the ground, the water, the canyon around me, the grass under me. I just started thinking of all the constants and, that kind of got me to calm down, and I took a big sniff because I was, like, snotty by then, and right when I sniffed, I heard footsteps around me. And when I looked up, there were 8 mule deer that had made a semicircle around me. I'm sure because they thought I was wounded or something, crying. And it was just the most surreal thing, to look up and it was like God's way of telling me, "Tammy, you're not alone. I've got you." And I kept thinking since that moment, like, what if, what if this is part of the plan? And who am I to question if this is part of the plan? So, even like being wheeled into surgery and watching the ceiling tiles, I was thinking about the deer and feeling their warmth, because you could feel that and just being reassured that, I wasn't alone. And what if this is part of the plan? And there's more to this deer story because I was telling I got a chance to talk to the nurse who took care of my mom when she was hospitalized for a long time in Colorado and, going through chemo and everything. And she had been in and out of comas and had a brain shunt and just very extensive. And she was, really good friends, got to be really good friends with her nurse, Kathleen. Well, I got a chance to talk to Kathleen and I was telling her this deer story and how it had brought me so much comfort, through all of my stuff, going through chemo and everything else. And she looked at me and she's like, "Tammy," she goes, "your mom has a deer story." I go, "Oh, I know, because my mom grew up like when she was 15, she had a pet deer, and it was like a big deal because it ate the uh, it was like a type of cereal, I forget what it's called, corn pops, I think it was called corn pops, and corn pops heard about this deer that loved corn pops, and they ended up sending, like, a year's supply to my mom, so it's kind of a big deal, this deer story of my mom, and Kathleen says, "No, that's not the deer story." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, towards the end, when your mom knew she was gonna die, she begged me to get her out of the hospital and just go for a drive to this national monument where I grew up hiking with my dad and sister. And she begged and somehow coerced Kathleen to get her out of the hospital, get her in the car. And they did. They drove out to this national monument, which is just beautiful, beautiful country. And she said my mom had her head outside the window just resting on her hands and the breeze in her face. And at one point in this clearing, she said, "Stop, stop, stop, stop right here." And so Kathleen stopped the car and my mom just started talking about all the deer, just look at them all. And there's this one and that one. And, she's pointing them out. And maybe it reminded her of her pet deer and, for whatever reason, she said, "Okay, I'm ready," ready to go back and basically face her fate. And she goes, "Tammy, it just brought her so much comfort, but there were no deer. She just saw them and it brought her comfort." And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing how, God used this deer story like through my mom, through me. And so then it was after my sister had passed, I was talking to her husband and I said, I don't think I ever asked Sheila if she had a deer story. And now I feel bad because she's gone. I wish I would have known if she ever had a deer story. And he said, "Tammy, don't you remember there's this recording of your sister? She was like 7 years old, running in a field with deer, like like they were all playing and, frolicking about, a child being childlike and the deer just loving it." And I just stopped in my tracks because I said, "You know what? Our mom died when Sheila was 7 years old, and that's when she needed to be comforted." Like, whoa, this was so amazing. So I have to say, when you ask, how did I do during my situation? One, I think my faith was there and it helped me just understand that maybe this was, even though I hated it, maybe this was part of the purpose, part of a plan, part of something that, was bigger than me. And so I tried to find the blessings in it. I couldn't wait for it to be over though. And two, it really, it really created, I just had so many questions. It was like I was so young and I was part of the medical system. And so you just, you're told, oh, if you do a bilateral mastectomy and go through 6 rounds of chemo, you're going to have 90% survival, blah. And that's what you're told. And I just didn't know anything different. I didn't know you could make different choices back then, but I just knew I had a lot of questions. So it, the whole process actually made me dig into the holistic world because I just wasn't getting my questions answered. Um, it didn't make sense. Like I had to sign a waiver that said chemotherapy may cause leukemia. And it's like, wait, what are we doing here? So, so the
It's a
cancer
swap,
treatment can
right?
cause blood cancer. Like, why are we doing this then? Or, like I had to sign a waiver for the breast implants too that they used for reconstruction. I just kept thinking to myself, I remember sitting on the porch, my hair is falling out, and I'm reading this waiver, and it's just like, God, I'm not going to die from breast implants, am I? Like, what is this? Like, how is everything so toxic, and how is this the only option given? So I had all these questions. Then once I got done with all of my, conventional treatment, they said, okay, to follow up, we want you to have a chest X-ray every 6 months. What? Like, what? I don't understand this. X-rays are for bones. Are there bones here that we need to, like, what are we doing here, people? X-rays are for bones. And a or a chest X-ray, a mammogram, that's X-ray, people. So we really shouldn't be X-raying our chest, our breast tissue and stuff. So it just brought up a lot of questions. I became that person, just asking tons of questions and wasn't getting the answers I was looking for. And so I, for lack of a better term, I just became a huge health nut after going through all of this. I think I survived, going through all the stuff because of faith, but then I also became that health advocate, of just digging in and trying to find answers. It's so fascinating because my cancer regimen was identical. The exact same drugs that my mom had in 1977 is what was given to me 25 years later. And so again, I look at that like, what are our cancer rates? They're only going up. Like, nothing is making this better. Clearly, there's not a whole lot of improvements because they're using the exact same protocol. And it just, again, I'm like, okay, we can do better. I really believe that, but I believe that people need to be informed. I feel like we're not getting informed consent for a lot of this stuff. And there's some great things going on around the world, but in the United States, we're way behind the times.
Yeah, I
So,
think most people they get the form. Here, sign off on this waiver, like minutes before they get the procedure. It's like you don't get the forms a lot of cases way in advance where you can do your own
right.
research and think about it. You don't really get a chance to say, well, what are the options? Like, what should I really be aware of, right? Because we're such a litigious society these days that even doctors are afraid to practice real medicine, and step outside of what they've been told to shove into people's throats and into their veins, because they don't want to get sued either. They don't want to get their medical license taken away. Now, there are, like you said, in this journey that you went on, there's a lot of doctors who've kind of come out of that shadow of big pharma and the FDA and certain things that are not necessarily, like, where's the money going, you know? who's benefiting from this monetarily. And I think when they finally stepped out and say, I'm willing to risk my license, and a lot of people have had their license pulled for talking about stuff like this openly, and even talking about some treatment options, high dose vitamin C and other things like that. Even people went through COVID, and I think there's more questions created from COVID than there were answers, and more villains that are still being exposed that were involved in this the conspiracy. Conspiracy theory means it's not necessarily true. It's just maybe. A conspiracy is absolutely true. And I
Yeah,
think at this point in time, we can all agree that that was a
I
conspiracy.
love that.
You
I
know,
love
but
that. Breast cancer was my COVID experience because I was
yeah.
already like, we're spidey senses up during that because of what I had experienced before. So
So
yeah,
what did you? Let's talk about your holistic journey, because I think in order again to really fortify not just your mind, your financial situation, but your body, to withstand whatever comes at you. Because like in your case, it's both mental and physical. It's crushing to your body, but it's crushing maybe even more to your mentality, like keeping yourself focused, positive, asking the big questions. And like, then you have to go back and relearn everything, because if you've been eating all of your noodles out of a plastic cup, now you got, what are you going to do instead, right? You can't be buying the plastic cup anymore if you're going to have that awakening and say, I'm done with the microplastics, and it's really tough to live a very natural life. So let's talk about that journey. Like, how did you go about transforming your day-to-day life, and what are some of the big epiphanies, big ahas that you started to uncover and discover, after you started that journey?
yeah. Well, first, I mean, what you said is so key is just like who are you surrounding yourself with? I remember my dad took off work to come and stay with me when I was going through chemo and everything, and maybe it was after the mastectomy too. And I remember he was just acting so weird. Like my dad's really outgoing and fun and jovial, and he was just really withdrawn and weird. And we had gone to Sam's Club. We were sitting in the Sam's Club parking lot before, we had just parked, and he just got this weird, I don't know, we were in a conversation, and I finally just stopped him. I said, "Dad, did you come to Michigan to be with me because you think I'm gonna die?" And he went and like looked out the window, didn't make eye contact with me. And I said, "If that's what you think, you need to go home. I'm not doing that. I'm not having people around me thinking that I'm dying. Like, I need people around me that believe I'm going to be okay. And this is part of God's plan." And he just looked at me and he was like, "Tammy, you're nothing like your mother." and and it was different, but it set the tone. Like, this is how we're going to play this. I'm not going to tolerate like all this negativity around. So that was one thing. And I had, Bible verses up all around my house and things to look at, trying to feed my mind with good positive messaging. Afterwards, the same thing. I mean, I had to go find other doctors that spoke my language. And I want to just, give a word picture here because I really think there's value in both, conventional medicine, but also in, more holistic practices. And it's like if your house was on fire, you call the fire department. You call the people who are going to put out the fire, and they're going to come and they're going to, douse your whole house with water on a regular day. Is it good for you to have your whole house doused with water? Is it good for you to have maybe your door axed down? No, that's not good for your house on a normal day. But on the day you need the fire put out, yes, you're calling those people. But then guess what? The fire's out and your house is soaked with water. The carpet's soaked. The door is, axed down. Like everything's a mess. So that's where I see integrative and functional medicine and, traditional Chinese medicine and, all Ayurvedic, all of these coming in to rebuild your house and to really rebuild the environment maybe that your house has been living in. And so I can see the value in both. I think Western medicine's emergency care is top of the line. But as far as managing, they say managing illness, Chinese medicine would say you just have some, you have some imbalances. So, but managing disease in the United States is terrible and it's antiquated and it's way behind the times. And we could learn from other countries. I mean, in Japan, breast cancer is virtually unheard of. It is so low. The rates are so low. So don't you think we should go and take, lessons from the Japanese women on how to deal with hormone changes? They virtually have no menopausal symptoms or perimenopause. I mean, it's just incredible how well they deal with all the hormone changes. And yeah, like I said, breast cancer is virtually unheard of. So I just think it's so interesting because there's so much going on around the world that is so helpful and so, um, good for your health. Whereas in the United States, it's like we're locked into this one way and that's it. And if you don't adhere to it, you can't be in this medical system. So why do you think so many people are going to Tijuana for stem cells or cancer treatment or peptides or, it's just so crazy that we don't have it really is follow the money, George. That's where the bottom line is. Cancer is a big business, and I hate saying it. I hate saying it, but it's true. Cancer is a big business, and it's only getting bigger, and it's not going to go away. But I do think people need to just know all their options and need to know that other options exist than what's being presented. And I think we need to push our doctors and our medical community to take a look at what other options there are, because I just think most physicians aren't educated either. But if it was their own family, they get educated really quick. So it's interesting.
Hmm. It's kind of like the congressional health care plan, right? It's not what everyone else gets, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's like that should be the canary in the coal mine. I was like, wait a minute now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't understand why people are not on the doorstep of Washington with pitchforks and torches. I really don't. I mean, we're at a point. Well, let me back up for a second. I think we will be pretty soon because we're not at that point yet. People are still pretty comfortable, and
Well,
as
we
long as
don't
they
make
keep
a lot
putting
of
money in
buy.
people's hands, they're going to stay comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yes. Another thing that came up for me, which I wasn't even aware that this was a thing, but they told me, for breast reconstruction, it was either be flat or get breast implants. Like those are your options. And I'm 27, so it's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I'll take the breast implants. And they said, and they're safe for life. That's all I was told. They're safe for life. And I'm like, great. So you think they're safe for life, great. But I just kept having all these health issues, even though I was very, into like figuring after going through breast cancer and chemo and everything, I was looking at the statistics that, only 10% of cancer is genetic, and yet 90% is then your lifestyle, it's your environment, it's the toxins, it's the pollution, it's, the stuff that's coming outside of you. And so I did. I switched to, more like cleaning with vinegar or that kind of stuff, baking soda. And I got plant-based makeup and deodorant, without the aluminum. And that's the other thing. In the United States, the cosmetic industry is not regulated, so it's just wild, wild west. And we know this because we know there's lead in lipstick. We know there's aluminum in deodorant. We know there's formaldehyde in mascara. How much formaldehyde, aluminum, and lead is good for you? Zero. Zero is good. There's carcinogens in baby products, which should be a crime. Like, I don't understand why this is allowed, but it is. And so this is what I do now is just help educate people on the hidden toxins in their personal care and, how they can reduce those toxins and make switches that are healthier. Again, even like the cookware that you're using and um, the type of water you're drinking, all these things. It's like sad that we have to look at it, but we do. I mean, we're getting we're getting poisoned from everywhere, every turn, every day. And so anyway, I ended up becoming a big health nut, and switching doctors and just um looking at ways like looking at ways every day that are going to add to my health instead of subtract from it. And it seems so simple, but wow, it's just, there's a lot of obstacles out there because I believe our bodies are perfect. It's just we have all these interferences, with our perfect system. And so with all that being said, I mean, I'm living a good, holistic, healthy life, and I was still having all these health challenges. And finally, someone I went to high school with, she said she had had her breast implants removed. And I'm like, "No kidding, why?" And she said, "Well, have you heard of breast implant illness?" And I'm like, "What? What? What are you talking about?" And she told me to join this Facebook group. There was like over 100,000 women in it in 2018. So I'm sure it's even bigger than that now. But all these women were saying the same thing. Like, I was having bloody noses every day. I had like carpal tunnel issues and achy bones and just stuff like weird things like eye pressure and headaches. And the thing that was most alarming though for me was my liver enzymes. My labs were like way off to the point where my holistic doctor said, "Tammy, you're headed for liver failure." And I don't even drink or anything, and I'm like, "How is that possible?" Like, I'm so healthy. And, I went to a lady who did a traditional Chinese medicine lady who did cupping on me, and wherever you bruise with the cupping is where you have weaknesses in your body. That's my very elementary way of explaining it, but all of my bruising was on my chest, and she said, "Tam, you gotta get these implants out." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I should, I've had them for a while, I should probably get them replaced." And she goes, "Tammy, get them out of your body. Like, these are toxic." And I'm like, "What? What?" Like, I didn't know. Like, I was so indoctrinated in they're safe for life. Well, then there's always that fear, like, what if I get them out and I don't feel any better? And it's not a known diagnosis, so insurance doesn't pay for this surgery, explant surgery. I had to get a loan for $10,000, which took me 5 years to pay off, but it's just like I just cannot believe how hard it is for women, with breast implants to get healthy, to get them out of your body and to get healthy. And so, I went through explant surgery in 2019. It was crazy. Within 8 weeks, my labs had normalized and I had lost 25 pounds easy without even trying. It was just like, "Phew," the inflammation was gone. The day of surgery, my carpal tunnel stuff was gone. It was profound, how quickly I felt better. And so that's I became a huge, advocate for just helping women understand more, just have more informed consent over breast implants, and also to learn about healthier options, which it took me a minute to find a healthier option for for breast reconstruction because there isn't a lot out there. But there is a doctor in Key Biscayne, Florida. He's at the Miami Breast Center. He started it, and he pioneered the technique to use your own fat to, reconstruct your breast with your own tissue. And so I went through that breast reconstruction at the Miami Breast Center with Dr. Corey, and it, when I had the breast implants removed, I was concave and scarred up. And I remember just looking at myself in the mirror, and all I could think of was how my sister looked when she died. And it put me in a really dark place. And I've never been suicidal, but I could see how that darkness can overtake you. And it just psychologically it was so hard being physically just feeling mutilated and dismissed and just left and told to be happy. And it's so interesting because one, there's a lot of survivor's guilt, when you live and your mom and sister don't. There's that survivor's guilt. It's like you feel guilty for being happy. I feel guilty for wanting reconstruction when they didn't get to have that choice. But also, um, there's something in our society, and I don't know what this is, but there's some kind of shame put on women who want reconstruction and desire just to replace what was lost. And you think about that, having a mastectomy is a breast amputation. If if someone had an arm amputation, no one would say, "Oh, you should just be happy." They would say, "Oh, that's great. You're getting a prosthetic. That's great that, you're gonna feel better feeling like you have that body part back." They don't do that to women. They shame you, like, "Well, how big do you wanna be, Tammy?" I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this isn't about size. This is about just replacing a body part that was lost, and why do I have to explain that? It is just wild. It is wild what women, have to navigate through all of this, and I don't know why that is. If if a man is struggling with erections or whatever, everyone's like, "You shouldn't," everyone's like, "Here, let me come to the rescue." No one would say, "Oh, you just need to deal with that," "Buck up, be happy." No, like, it's just fascinating though how, I don't know, there's like some kind of stigma around women and breasts. But even women who want to augment, I mean, doing the fat transfer is I mean, it's the most natural way to do it. I mean, there's nothing more natural than your own body fat. It's just kind of rearranging the furniture, taking from one area, and he can reshape and slim and, kind of contour how you want, and then replace that fat up where you need it. So it's fascinating how, again, Dr. Corey, I see being such a proponent for doing what's right for the woman, and you just don't see that as much in other areas of healthcare, and it's sad. It's sad, isn't it? So, anyway, I actually, took a position there. He asked me after being a patient if I would come and work with him because 'cause I'm already an advocate for him, and I just respect him so much, and so, yeah, I'm doing a couple days a week helping him at the breast center now, and in a way, it's like, you know, it's so hard losing someone, and again, the survivor's guilt is real, but the love doesn't go away. You always have that love, and I see helping other women through their hard times as just expanding the love and making it all matter, and really, it's just a way to honor my sister and mom by expanding that love. So so anyway, that's where I've found a lot of healing is just, being a voice for women, and there's just so much to navigate, and I'm happy to be that person just to straight talk, give you the truth, and give all the options, not tell people what to do, but just let them know what the options are so they can do what's right for them.
In dealing with by the way, thanks for sharing that. Actually, that was really touching, actually. I was, starting to tear up a few times, you know, "Hold it down, hold it down." Um, for a lot of the younger generation where they see, the TikToks and the, influencers and whatnot, like, aesthetics are such a big part of their identity, and I'm seeing this not just in teenagers, I'm seeing this in people in their 20s and even into their mid-30s, that have kind of grown up in that generation. Not the generation so much that you heard about the breast implant illness and things like that, because they're not thinking, "Oh, that's not gonna happen to me." Um, and I'm wondering, in dealing with, these situations, at the clinic and just going through your own situation, being an advocate, how do you open a conversation with someone about this maybe not being the healthiest choice if they decide to get them, or maybe they already have them, and you're, trying to talk them out. I would say talk them out of it, but informed consent, like really having the conversation where they're not going to be pushing it away, thinking that you're telling them what to do, or that, you're not my mom kind of thing. Like, obviously, it has to originate with them. Otherwise, you're going to hit a brick wall with some people. How do you
Yeah.
have that conversation?
Yeah, well, the truth is not everyone has problems with breast implants. It's just the same as, if you had a plate in your knee or you know what I mean, an implant in your tooth. Like a lot of people do just fine. Other people have huge reactions to something foreign in their body. And so it's just, a fact of the matter. Everyone reacts a little differently. Um, but yeah, I guess I'm just again, I'm the person that will put the options and the information on the table for people just to make their own decisions. But um, I think that people who end up at Miami Breast Center, they've done their homework. They see that the other options aren't so great. And they're open. They're open to a more natural. They're looking for a more natural way. And what what's so cool is they have this procedure. So if someone does have breast implants, and I wish I knew this when I needed explant surgery, I didn't know about this, but um, at my breast center, they can take your current implants out, replace them with smaller ones, and do a round of fat transfer. And then you come back months later and they step you down again, more fat, less implant, more fat, less implant until it's all your own body fat. So I just think that's pretty cool for people who are looking for a less abrupt way of dealing with it all. They can just do kind of the step down approach and always feel good in their clothes.
What do you wish someone would have told you earlier in your life?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, well, I think this is true for all of us, is to trust yourself. And it sounds so simple, but we give our power away every day. We think people know better what's best for us, but we know it's like our body, you feel it in your body first, like your stomach knots up or you get tension in your neck or a headache or nauseous, like you feel it in your body if it's not right. And then for some reason, women especially, we still push that feeling aside and say, "Oh, they must know better than we do." And so I think it's then like I've had to practice flexing that muscle of just trusting myself and paying attention to my body. And when it's right, you feel that, oof, that wave of relief, that peace that comes over you when you know it's the right decision for you. And so I really I wish I had just had someone tell me that, like, "Tammy, if you're not feeling good about it, you don't have to rush into a decision. You don't have to say yes. You can take your time and you can, figure out what is right for you." And it's like just giving yourself permission to trust yourself.
Like with any muscle, of course, if you've let it atrophy, it's going to be harder to build it up, especially in the beginning. How would people who maybe have given away that power start to flex that muscle, start to exercise those muscles to take back control of their future and their own decision-making process?
Well, I think, again, like you said, we're in this day and age, we're in an information age. And so there's just so much more access to information now than, 2002 when I was going through it. So I mean, there's been so many books written on breast implant illness. There's podcasts, I don't know if you can I, th- I think you can get a list of the ingredients in breast implants, but it's still hard um, to get the insert for the breast implants, with the ingredients for the ones that they're giving you, because they open that box in a sterile field in the OR and throw that away. And so I still think it's a little difficult to get your exact ingredients for implants, but online there's a lot of information for the general ingredients that are put in them. And yeah, it's a lot of carcinogens, it's a lot of neurotoxins. And think about it, it's right over your heart and lungs. And no wonder so many women are having, autoimmune issues and, inflammatory kind of issues because they're sitting right there. And it's kind of like an IV drip. It's just like a slow leak of toxins into your body constantly. It doesn't stop until you get them out. So yeah, I would just say if you're a person kind of on the fence, there's so much more information that you can access now. There's groups, I think that's so powerful too, is just getting in a group with other women to see what their experience has been before you make a decision. I think that's really powerful. So,
You said something earlier about your environment playing a big role in things. I think that, as far as why you would get cancer, or more importantly, what happens after you decide to make these lifestyle changes. Because I think that the crab in the bucket syndrome is really easy to fall back into those old habits if everyone around you is smoking and, they're not going to give it up, for one reason or another. And you want to quit, but it's becomes really hard, or maybe everyone else is overeating or eating not a healthy lifestyle, or they're drinking, or it could be anything. It could really just be anything. Other vices that are not healthy. Um, did you have to cut off people from your life that weren't serving the new mission that you had? And if so, like, how did you go about making that okay?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you just start, yeah, getting into different circles and um yeah, just going to, different conferences. But it is interesting. Your question just made me think of um it's not so often in medicine, in all medicine, with all diseases, they talk about genetics, it must run in the family, but really 10% or less is genetics. But what it comes down to is those habits, those family traditions, like, so yeah, if you're eating the same recipes that, were maybe handed down in your family, or, the way you grew up in school is the way you're still eating today, going to fast food or whatever. It is like food is such a nostalgic thing, people eat ice cream because it makes them think of something that made them feel happy when they were a child and that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying don't eat ice cream. I'm just saying try to find the one with the least ingredients or make your own or, do it in a healthier manner. We all love our treats, but they can again add to our health instead of subtract from them if you can, find a healthier way to navigate it. But I just think too, like, look at I think a lot of people just don't know how or don't realize how bad they feel. It's like you almost get used to a chronic headache, you get used to chronic fatigue, you get used to, having allergies or a stomach ache every time you eat, or, you know, not being able to get through the day without a pot of coffee, or you know what I mean? It's just so interesting how I think that's just become our vernacular, the way people live in this, they're taking pills to go to sleep, they're taking something to wake up, and it's like that's I, I really I just really think there is and there's needs to still be more of a push to get back to nature, to get back to the way God made our bodies to work. We're rhythmic beings. We need to, be outside in nature. We need to look at the sun. We need to be in the sun. We need to like see the stars and see the moon at night, and it regulates your sleep wake cycles. We shouldn't be eating late at night. You should eat when it's daylight. Even taking a walk after a meal, that's so good for digestion. These are like easy and free things, but and it's so funny because you hear the word biohacking all the time. Biohacking is just doing the things that nature already provides. Even just getting into like all the bee products, like, oh my goodness, like local organic fresh honey and bee pollen and the royal jelly and the propolis. Like there's so many healing effects, and mushrooms are incredible. There's so much in nature, even herbs and the spices that we use can be so healing, and it's so easy. Like you can grow this stuff in your backyard. Like it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be difficult. It can just be you cultivating new habits, new traditions, finding new recipes. And I know that's hard for a lot of people because you have to go through some trial and error, but isn't it worth it, to feel better and just again create your own um new treats that are healthier, and especially as we come into the holiday season, finding things that still make you feel that nostalgia, but also it's not gonna break your health, it's not gonna make you feel ill and and, speed up your demise here. So, I don't know, there's just so much we can do. I think another thing that drives me absolutely crazy is all the fragrance, like the Glade plugins and the scented candles and the scented fabric softeners, and woo, all those fragrances are endocrine disruptors. They mess up your hormones. It'll make you have a harder time through perimenopause if you're using all these things in your home that affect your hormones. The colognes, like all that stuff, it's just not good for you. Like so yeah, getting back to essential oils and finding the things. I'm not saying don't smell good, but find like a natural jasmine oil and make your own little blend. And it's so fun. It's so fun to do that. And it's from nature and it boosts your your health, instead of taking away from it. So I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to feel good, everyone wants to look good, everyone wants to have more energy. It's just not knowing how. And so, I would again look for groups, look for companies that align with your values and seek it out. And there's other people who, if you're feeling this way, there's other people who would feel this way too, who just want to, be healthier. And that's the thing. It's not that I don't hang out with people who are unhealthy. I love all people. I feel like that's my mission in life is to love people and then love them some more. But I think just values align, when you have similar values, you kind of tend to hang out with those people who share those values. So I think and maybe that's where you start is just figuring out what you value the most, so start there and then you can, plug into groups and communities of people who have those same values.
Have you been back to Rocky Flats?
It's crazy because, we went we were we were touring with our movie this summer, and we actually, had a couple screenings in Colorado, and I asked Carl specifically, I'm like, "Do you wanna just see if we can fit in a day at Rocky Flats and just go walk around?" And we did. We went and walked on the property and drove all around it. It's huge. It's huge. And, it was just in a way, it was so eerie, and then in another way, it's just like it's just part of the town, part of the community. There's still a bustling community around this huge plot of land, and you just wonder if people even know what it is, and, there's wildflowers growing, and the birds are singing, and it was just kinda wild because there's, like, trails now. It's kind of, they've made it into kind of a wilderness preserve, which is funny. But, so it looks really pretty, but if you were to dig into the soil, there's still plutonium there. But yeah, we went and walked around. I took some video and just took it all in. I think it's so interesting because it made me think of, how animals always perceive danger first. And so if you wake up one morning and you can't hear the birds singing, there's something up, I would definitely like a storm is coming or something is going on if the birds aren't singing. But if the birds are singing, that means they feel safe and things are good. Well, we were walking on this trail through Rocky Flats and the birds are just chirping and singing. And I just kept thinking about that, like, wow, they perceive that it's safe here, but if you dug underneath, there's just a whole history. There's so much that isn't safe. And one thing I didn't tell you, like this was part of, this lady's book about Rocky Flats. She said that when they were trying to contain all this, plutonium sludge or whatever, this waste product from making these plutonium triggers, they were putting it into mud and it wouldn't like solidify. So it was just like this sludge, and they'd put it in like the big 500-gallon barrels, but then those would leak out into the ground. So they stuck this sludge, this plutonium sludge that's totally contaminated on a train. They put it on a train, and the train went from here to there to here to there for 10 years. It sat on a train. Like, this is how they're dealing with it. They're not dealing with it. So it's a big
Where
mess.
was there? Did you find out where there was?
It's probably in the book, but it was just like it was going back and forth on a train for years. Like they did the same route over and over. So, yeah,
Mhm.
fascinating.
People don't even know what could be in their backyard,
Right. So
you
much.
know?
And I'm not like here to create fear or anything like that, but I feel like in today's day and age, we need to be our own advocates because the government isn't the end all be all, you know? I'm grateful to live in a free country and everything, but we need to take care of ourselves and we need to be educated and we need to go back to nature. We need to learn how to grow our own food and, like just get back to the basics instead of again giving our power away and and trusting a system that hasn't really had our best interest in mind. So,
Mhm. Well, I mean, a free country doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to poison your neighbor's family, right? there's no freedom there at all. That's basically pushing accountability, to someone or something else, or just throwing your arms up and saying, it's not my problem.
Yeah, and
I got
covering it
paid.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is, it's wild. Well, I'm writing a book about it now, because again, this decision that was made in I'm assuming a conference room way back when in the 50s, to build Rocky Flats 2 miles from residence that affects my life today. I don't even know how many I probably had 20 or more surgeries in my lifetime and lost, my family and so yeah, that one decision affected me in such a profound way, and it continues to, but I'm so determined to again make it matter and be a voice for those people that are still, affected in that area. Because there's still a huge concentration of breast cancer, and Denver has the highest rate of infertility. Isn't that interesting? So, I mean, there's still after effects, aftershocks going on that I think people don't even know are related to where they live. So,
Well, Tammy, thank you for doing the good work and taking, this personal and helping pay it forward. Because I think if the more of us that would do that, kind of watch out for our neighbors and realize that we're all of the same flesh, like we're humans, the tree doesn't branch that far out,
yeah.
right? So we're all brothers and sisters, and we should take care of each other a whole lot more. And I think that's part of what you said earlier about getting back to, I mean, you would even just say biblical principles, the golden rules, the 10 commandments, like those things. If people just had more of that in their life and actually did it, and not just stick it on a wall and look at it in the bathroom when they're brushing their teeth and then go on with the rest of their day, right?
Yeah.
They actually took it to heart and actually tried to exercise those muscles. I think we would be in a much, much more conscious, healthier place. So thank you for everything that you're doing. For those who want to connect with you and reach out to you and maybe share a little bit about their story. Maybe they're looking for some healing. Maybe they don't have somebody or someone else that they can talk to about some of the things that they're concerned about. How would they reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Tami Lee Boothby, and also Instagram as Healthy Tami Lee 1 because my other Healthy Tami Lee got deactivated. But anyway, so now I'm on Healthy Tami Lee 1 on Instagram. But yeah, I would love to hear from people and definitely connect and be a person that can be a resource for you to help you connect to other groups and other communities that might serve you the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy, and we'll see everybody on the next session.
Thanks so much, George.
If you've been waiting for a sign to finally reset to get your foundation solid, this is it. Join our 3-day online Unbreakable Bootcamp to help you build strength across your mind, your body, your emotions, and your finances. You can go to unbreakable.bootcamp.com right now and register while it's still free, or click the link in the description. Again, that's unbreakable.bootcamp.com.